Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are jumping into a really profound, almost existential question that a listener sent in.
It's one of those ideas that once you hear it, you can't really unhear it.
Exactly. And the core idea is this. Every created being, and that means us, you, me, everything, we're all living in a kind of jail.
Mm-hmm. And not a jail of metal bars, but a jail defined by necessity, by absolute dependence. Philosophers have a word for it. Contingency.
And our listener laid this out so clearly. The most immediate jails, the ones you can't ignore. For instance, the jail of air.
Right.
I mean, if you start breathing, you're gone in minutes. It's an absolute wall you can't pass.
It's a non-negotiable prison. And then there's what they call the elastic jail of food and water. I thought that was a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's brilliant because the timeline is longer, days or weeks, but the boundary is just as real. It's still a death sentence if you cross it.
Inevitable. And these are just the biological prisons. The listener also pointed out the other constraints.
The social and financial ones, the feeling of, not being able to go somewhere, do something because you can't afford it, or because some power that's mightier than me simply says no.
It all builds to this single, terrifying conclusion they proposed.
That true freedom, absolute freedom, can't exist unless you are a transcendent being. That everything else, every single other thing, relies on something else just to exist.
So our mission for this deep dive is to take that very bold claim and really analyze it using the full scope of the biblical canon.
Old Testament, New Testament, Jesus' own words, the apostles, all the way to Revelation.
Exactly. And we're going to try and show two things. First, why the Bible argues that only God is truly free, this idea of aseity. And second, and this is the crucial part, how human freedom is found only through a complete union with him.
A kind of entanglement, as the listener put it.
Precisely. We've got a ton of sources that really dig into this.
Yeah.
They suggest the only way out of the jail isn't escaping dependency altogether, but by depending on the only one who is truly independent.
Okay, let's unpack that. It sounds like a huge paradox. So let's start where our listener did, with the really obvious stuff, the hard constraints, the walls of the jail we can actually feel.
Well, the first thing we have to do is just acknowledge our own fragility. Biologically, we are chained to very specific conditions.
Oxygen, water, food.
And not just those, but temperature, pressure. These aren't suggestions. They are the absolute foundation of our existence. You can delay the need, but you can never, ever eliminate it.
Our bodies are basically just high-maintenance machines.
That's a perfect way to think about it. And they're operating under these incredibly strict, unbendable regulations that we had no say in.
And that's just biology. It goes so much deeper. We're also shackled by physics.
We're stuck in linear time. We can't escape it. We're bound by gravity.
You can't just decide to float.
You cannot.
Right.
And then there's maybe the most pervasive law of all, the one that governs everything that's ever been created.
You're talking about entropy.
The second law of thermodynamics. The relentless, unstoppable march toward decay and disorder. Every single created thing, a star, a cell, a civilization, is subject to it. The moment it comes into being, it begins to unwind.
That sounds incredibly bleak.
It is, from one perspective. But it's essential for defining the prison. It all points to this one philosophical concept, contingency.
Okay, so define that for us again, because you said it's the centerpiece of this whole thing.
Contingency is the state of existing only because something outside of you made it possible. A contingent being doesn't grant itself existence, it receives it. And it needs an external framework, a scaffold, to keep on existing.
So if you're contingent, you are by definition not free.
Inherently unfree, you are dependent.
What's so fascinating is how the source material applies this idea to, everything, all the way down to the atomic level, these atomic jails.
Right. We know everything needs space and time to be in, a rock, a planet, whatever, but even the fundamental particles aren't free. Well, this is where theology and modern physics have a really interesting conversation. Particles have to obey laws they didn't choose. Gravity, charge, spin, they don't get a vote.
And the listener mentioned this idea of them being in probabilistic prisons. What does that mean?
It's about quantum mechanics. At the quantum level, a particle sort of exists as a wave of potential until an observer interacts with it.
Yeah.
That observation forces it to collapse into a single definite state.
Okay, so to put that simply, the particle isn't even sure where it is or what it is until something outside of it defines it.
That's a great way to put it. Its reality is contingent. It's dependent on that external act of observation to become definite, and it's dependent on the laws that govern its behavior in the first place.
Which brings up a crazy question. If the particles are contingent on the laws, what are the laws contingent on? They didn't make themselves, right?
And that is the absolute crux of the theological argument. The laws themselves are not self-sustaining.
So the ultimate jail that binds us, time, gravity, all of it, has to be held up by something else.
Exactly. And this is where our sources point directly to Christ. You look at a passage like Colossians 1, in him all things hold together.
They hold together.
Or Hebrews 1, that the Son upholds the universe by the word of his power. It's not just that he created it and let it go. It's an active, continuous act of maintenance.
So the stability of an atom, the constant of gravity, all the rules of the prison
are being upheld moment by moment by the word of the one who is truly free. He's not just the one outside the jail. He is actively sustaining the jail itself.
Wow. That reframes everything. It means nothing is self-sufficient. Not an angel, not a rock, not a galaxy. Everything needs that divine scaffold.
This isn't just a human problem. It's a universal truth about created existence. And the Bible is explicit about this. It frames this reality as a form of bondage.
Where do we see that?
Romans 8 is the key text here. It says that creation itself was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of the one who subjected. And it says creation will one day be set free from its bondage to corruption.
Bondage to corruption. That's entropy again.
It is. It's a cosmic groan. The entire universe is in a jail of decay, waiting for liberation. This futility means that everything created is bound to run down, bound to fail, because it's dependent.
So the conclusion is just inescapable. If every single created thing is dependent on external conditions, then nothing created can ever be truly free.
Which means true freedom must be the exclusive domain of a necessary being, one who depends on absolutely nothing.
Okay, so that brings us to God. If everything else is in this jail of contingency, God has to be something completely different.
He has to be. And the theological term for that difference is aseity. It's from Latin, and it means existing from himself.
From himself.
It's the concept of total self-existence and independence. This is the foundation of God's absolute freedom. He's the uncreated creator, the source of all being, not a recipient of it.
And the sources show that the Bible doesn't just, hint at this. It makes it the absolute core of God's identity, starting right in the Old Testament.
You have to go to Exodus 3. Moses is at the burning bush, and he asks God for his name. And the reply he gets is, I am, W-H-O, I am.
Which is such a strange and powerful answer.
It's not just a name. It's a statement about the nature of reality. It's a declaration of absolute, independent, self-sustaining being. Notice, he doesn't say I was or I will be.
Why is that distinction so important?
Because I was or I will be would imply that he is subject to the flow of linear time. But I am is a statement of permanent, unchangeable, ever-present reality. He exists outside the timeline that he created for the rest of us.
And the Psalms pick up on that theme too, this idea of being outside of time.
For sure. Psalm 90 says God is from everlasting to everlasting. He existed before the mountains were even born. So he can't be bound by time or space because he created them. He preceded them.
Which makes him, by definition, incomparable to anything inside creation.
Exactly. And this is a huge theme for the prophet Isaiah. He spends so much time hammering this point home, contrasting the transcendent God with the little idols that contingent humans carve out of wood and stone. In Isaiah 40, he asks these rhetorical questions, like, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand and calculated the dust of the earth in a measure?
The scale of that is just mind-bending. The oceans of the entire planet fit in the palm of his hand. It's meant to show a difference not just in degree, but in kind.
A complete difference in the category of being. And then Isaiah 44 just states it plainly, I am the first and I am the last. Besides me, there is no God.
So there's no one else in his category. It's a declaration of absolute uniqueness.
It is. If there were another God, he would be in some way defined by or dependent on that relationship. But this statement claims absolute ontological singularity. He is not contingent on anything or anyone.
And this idea of aseity, of not needing anything, speaks directly to our listeners' list of jails. God doesn't need air or food or money.
And this comes through so powerfully in the New Testament. I think the clearest, most concise statement is when Paul is preaching in Athens.
Well, Mark.
Yes, in Acts 17. He tells these highly educated Greek philosophers that God does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything.
As though he needed anything.
That's the core phrase. And he follows it up by saying, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything.
That's the ultimate reversal. It completely refutes the jail of need. We think we're giving something to God through worship or service, but Paul is saying God doesn't require any of it. He's the one giving us everything, including our next breath.
If you were to withdraw that sustaining power, we would just blink out of existence. The Old Testament was just as clear on this. In Psalm 50, God says, if I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and all its fullness are mine.
I don't need your sacrifices because I own the cattle on 1,000 hills.
The whole system. It's pure aseity. He can't be put in our debt because he owns everything. Job 41 says the same thing. Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine.
Realizing that the one who defines freedom literally does not need you, that changes everything. It's not a relationship of obligation anymore.
It becomes one of pure grace. And this nature, this independence, is fully and eternally shared within the Godhead. It belongs to the Son as well.
This is where Jesus makes some of his most shocking claims.
Absolutely. In John 8, he's in a debate and he drops this bombshell. Before Abraham was, I am. He's directly claiming that same timeless, self-existent nature from the burning bush in Exodus. He's saying he exists outside the historical timeline of his own people.
And we already touched on this, but his role as the sustainer really drives home the difference between the free one and the dependent creation.
Right. Colossians 1, Hebrews 1. They both say that all things are held together and upheld by him.
So the very laws of physics, the bars of our physical jail,
they are themselves contingent upon the will of the free one for their continued existence. The jailer is sustaining the jail.
which is both a terrifying and, I guess, a hopeful thought.
It has to be both. And then you get to the end of the story in Revelation, and God is declared the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is and who was and who is to come.
So complete authority over past, present, and future. No temporal constraints at all.
And 1 Timothy nails it down, calling God the one who alone has immortality and dwells in unapproachable light. He is completely free from the jail of decay and death. And he's even free from the constraint of being observed and defined, unlike that quantum particle we talked about. He can't be contained or collapsed by our observation.
So, aseity. That's it. That is the necessary condition for true freedom. Okay, so we've established this massive divide. The entire created order is in a contingent jail, and God alone is free. So we have to ask the listener's question. How does God's freedom help us? How does it translate into freedom for us who are stuck in these constraints?
And this is where the sources take a really important turn. The focus shifts dramatically. They insist that our most restrictive, our most dangerous prison isn't the physical one.
It's a spiritual one.
It is. I mean, the lack of air will kill your body, but the Bible argues that the bondage of sin is what destroys the soul. Jesus himself identified this. In John 8, he says, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin.
A slave to sin, not just a perpetrator of it.
Exactly. It's a state of being, a condition of bondage so complete that we don't have the internal power to break free.
Paul describes this so vividly. It's not just about making a few bad choices. He frames it as an unbreakable spiritual law.
That's the famous agony in Romans 7. He says, I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. He's describing this internal civil war. He wants to do good, but he's compelled by this other force inside him.
The law of sin.
He calls it a law because it's predictable, it's consistent, and it's coercive. It operates within him against his own will, leading him to cry out, wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death.
He's describing a jail inside his own skin, an internal prison he can't escape.
It's a structural prison. We are shackled to our own moral weakness, and we can't break the chains ourselves.
And this jail is, according to the sources, actively guarded. It's not a passive state.
No, it's exacerbated by the enemy. John 10 calls Satan a thief who comes only to steal and kill and destroy. John 8 calls him a murderer and the father of lies. His primary tactic is deception, keeping us bound to futility.
This brings up a really important question for the listener. If freedom is only found in union with God, doesn't that just sound like we're trading one jail for another, swapping our dependence on biology for a dependence on God?
That is the essential question to ask, and the answer has to lie in the nature of the dependence.
Okay.
The slavery to sin is a destructive dependence. It's a reliance on an internal pattern that, as Romans 6 says, leads to death. It's a downward spiral.
But dependence on God is different.
The sources argue it's a life-giving dependence. It's connecting back to the very source of existence, which brings about flourishing and true liberty. It's the difference between being plugged into a power source and being chained to a corpse.
So the spiritual jail needs a transcendent prison breaker.
And Jesus announced his mission was to be exactly that. When he stands up in the synagogue in Luke 4, he reads from the prophet Isaiah, saying he was sent to proclaim liberty to the captives, to set at liberty those who are oppressed.
This was his mission statement.
It was. And then he makes the most audacious promise in John 8. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
Free indeed. That implies a different kind of freedom than what we normally think of.
It's not just a legal pardon. It's an ontological freedom, a change in the very structure of our being, in our relationship to these constraining laws.
And the apostles, after the resurrection, they write about this as a present reality, something that actually happened.
Oh, absolutely. Paul, the same man who was crying out in despair in Romans 7, declares in Romans 8 that the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set me free from the law of sin and death.
A higher law has overridden the lower law.
It's a complete nullification of the internal jail. A transcendent law has intervened and canceled out the law that was leading to death.
And then in Galatians, he says we have to actively defend this freedom.
Yes, Galatians 5. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. So it's something that has been achieved for us, but that we have to live in and protect.
And there's a direct link made between God's actual presence and our freedom.
2 Corinthians 3. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. This confirms it. Freedom is not an environment. It's not a political system. It's a relational state. It exists in the presence of the free one.
Which brings us to that beautiful analogy Jesus uses in John 15.
The vine and the branches. It's the perfect illustration of this paradox. A branch is only free to do what it was made to do, to flourish, to bear fruit, when it is completely and utterly dependent on the vine.
If it tries to be independent,
it experiences true, fatal contingency. It's cut off from its life source, it withers, it dies, and it's thrown into the fire. It returns to the raw constraint of entropy.
So for a created being, true freedom is found in being completely bound up, wrapped up, and tangled up, as our listener said, in relationship with the only one who is truly free.
In that union, his aseity, his self-sufficiency, covers our contingency.
Our dependence on him is what makes our freedom possible. What a paradox. Okay, so this is the theory. God is free, and union with him makes us free. Now we need the proof. How does this transcendent power actually break through into our world and override the physical and social jails we talked about at the beginning?
And the sources are filled with what we could call historical demonstrations of this principle. These stories aren't just, quite moral fables. They're presented as factual accounts of the laws of creation being suspended by the Creator.
Let's start with the one that directly addresses the listener's jail of heat, the fiery furnace.
Daniel 3. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The constraints here were, absolute. King Nebuchadnezzar heats the furnace 7 times hotter than normal.
So hot that the guards who threw them in were killed by the heat.
Exactly. The law of thermodynamics was in full effect, and these 3 men were bound, helpless, and thrown into the heart of it. They should have been incinerated instantly.
But they weren't. The physical jail failed to hold them. And the key is what the king sees.
He's shocked. He looks in and says, I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods.
4 men unbound.
That's a crucial detail. The fire consumed their bonds, the metal jail, but it couldn't touch their bodies. The fire was there, but it wasn't able to act according to its own nature.
The text even says their clothes weren't singed and they didn't smell like smoke.
The law of chemistry and combustion was nullified. Why? Because a transcendent presence, the 4th man, was with them inside the constraint.
This is a powerful type, then, of God not just rescuing us from our jails, but getting in them with us.
And it directly fulfills the promise we see in Isaiah 43. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. The jail of heat is no match for the one who created heat.
Okay, so what about the jail of metal bars, the more conventional prison?
We see the same principle in the New Testament. Look at Acts 12 when Peter's arrested. He's in what we would call a maximum security situation.
Chained between 2 soldiers, guards at the door, an iron gate.
It was meant to be inescapable. But an angel shows up, and the first thing that happens is the chains fell off his hands. But then look at the infrastructure itself. The big iron gate to the city.
It opened for them of its own accord?
The very materials that human power designed to contain people just yielded. They gave way to the higher power of the free one. Human engineering is contingent, too.
We see it again with Paul and Silas, but with a different result.
In Acts 16, yes. They're in prison, in stocks, and they're singing. They're already demonstrating that internal freedom we talked about.
And then the earthquake hits.
A huge earthquake. It shakes the prison's foundations, all the doors fly open, and everyone's chains come loose.
But this time, the liberation isn't about escape. It's about opportunity.
Exactly. It becomes a platform for the gospel. The terrified jailer is about to kill himself, but Paul stops him, and it leads directly to the conversion of the jailer and his entire family. God doesn't just break the jail. He redeems the whole situation, turning a place of punishment into a place of salvation.
This all speaks to the listener's concern about being stopped by people who are mightier than me, the jail of human authority.
And the Bible is adamant that God is completely sovereign over all human authority. Political power is just another contingent force.
The book of Proverbs has that incredible line about the king's heart.
Proverbs 21. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. It means the will of the most powerful person on earth is ultimately subject to the direction of the truly free God.
And Jesus says this directly to Pilate's face.
He does. In John 19, Pilate is boasting about his power to crucify or release Jesus. And Jesus calmly tells him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above."
All earthly power is derivative. It's on loan.
It is. So that jail of human authority is also contingent. And that brings us to the final barrier, the ultimate jail that no one escapes on their own.
The jail of death.
The final enemy. And this is the ultimate jailbreak. 1 Corinthians 15 says that through the resurrection, death is swallowed up in victory. The universal law of decay and mortality is definitively broken.
And Christ claims to hold the authority over it.
He does. In Revelation 1, the risen Christ declares, "I hold the keys of death and Hades." He's the only one who can unlock that final gate because he walked into it willingly and then shattered it from the inside.
The miracles he performed, like raising Lazarus, were they previews of this?
Absolutely. They were physical demonstrations, signs pointing to his ultimate freedom over mortality, assuring us that even the most fundamental biological constraint is temporary.
So as we pull all these threads together, let's look at this whole concept from a few different angles. The allegorical depth here is pretty stunning.
It really is. I mean, those physical jails you first mentioned, needing air, food, heat, they function as these profound metaphors for our contingency. They're constant physical reminders that our existence is borrowed, not inherent. They're there to keep us humble.
So we don't mistake ourselves for the necessary being.
Exactly. And then the Bible uses these powerful allegories for the man-made systems that try to enslave us.
You're thinking of Mystery Babylon in Revelation.
Yes. Babylon is the great symbol of worldly systems, economic, political, cultural, that trap people. It enslaves them through the love of money, through deception, through the pursuit of created things instead of the creator. It's the jail of human idolatry.
And the fiery furnace, what does that represent?
The furnace becomes this incredible type or allegory for any kind of trial or persecution. It could be a financial crisis, a health diagnosis, social pressure. It represents any constraint that feels like it will consume you.
But the story teaches that God's presence inside the furnace changes the nature of the fire.
It does. It's no longer purely destructive. It becomes revealing. It reveals his power, and it purifies the one who trusts him.
This all has huge implications for our emotional and psychological freedom.
It's the whole game. Look at Paul. He's writing his letter to the Philippians from a literal Roman prison cell. But the letter is filled with joy.
He's not praying for the doors to open. He's talking about contentment.
Yes. In Philippians 4, he says he's learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether he has plenty or is in need. He found a freedom that was internal.
It was a state of peace and hope rooted in God, not in his circumstances.
And he says he could do it all through Christ who gives me strength. His strength wasn't coming from the removal of the chains, but from his connection to the free one while wearing the chains. It shows that God's power works perfectly within our limitations.
And that also helps with the biggest psychological prison of all, the fear of death.
Hebrews 2 says that Christ came to deliver those who, through fear of death, were subject to lifelong slavery. Once you know the ultimate jail has been broken, the fear that powers so many of our other anxieties loses its grip.
We also have to talk about the unseen, the spiritual realities behind our feeling of being constrained.
That's a crucial layer.
Yeah.
Ephesians 6 reminds us, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of darkness. So a lot of the time, that feeling of being stuck, of being limited by invisible weights, it might not just be your psychology. It could be a spiritual battle.
And paradoxically, our weaknesses, our personal jails, they actually become the place where God shows up most powerfully.
That's the divine economy Paul describes in 2 Corinthians 12. He begs God to take away his thorn in the flesh, his limitation, and God says no.
He says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness."
Perfect in weakness. Our constraints, our limitations, force us into a state of dependency. And it's in that very state that God's transcendent power is displayed most clearly. So Paul concludes, when I am weak, then I am strong.
Okay, so let's make this really practical for today. How does this apply to the modern jails we feel trapped in?
Well, our jails look a bit different, but the principle is the same. Think about the collective anxiety we feel over fragile supply chains, or the feeling of being trapped by algorithms on social media or controlled by giant tech companies. It's a kind of digital Babylon.
Or the economic jail of inflation, or the cultural jail that demands we conform to certain beliefs or be ostracized.
All of them. And this biblical concept completely reframes them. It says these external limits are not the final word. They are the context in which God's power and our true freedom can be demonstrated.
So true freedom isn't about having a perfect government or a booming economy.
No, it's about having an inner security, a moral autonomy that's rooted in the transcendent, which can't be touched by the government or the stock market. It means you can resist the financial jail because your ultimate provision is from the one who owns it all anyway.
Which all points toward an ultimate future freedom.
Yes, the final hope of the new creation in Revelation 21 and 22. This is when all jails are permanently and universally abolished.
He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, mourning, or crying, or pain.
The jail of death is gone. The jail of sorrow is gone. And then Revelation 7 says, they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat.
The biological jails are gone. Complete liberation from every form of necessity.
The entire contingent world is finally and fully absorbed into the perfect, non-contingent reality of God's presence. That is the ultimate jailbreak.
So this entire deep dive really just confirms what our listener already felt in their bones. We are, by our very nature, dependent creatures. We cannot make ourselves free.
We can't. And our freedom isn't found by somehow escaping necessity, but by embracing a radical, complete dependence on the only being who has no needs at all.
The ascetic God.
The promise is that when you are bound up, wrapped up, and tangled up in a relationship with him, abiding in the vine, his self-sufficiency actually covers your contingency.
It's more than just being given a key to the jail cell.
It's being enveloped by the very presence of the free one, who then walks with you inside the cell, rendering its bars and laws meaningless.
God isn't just the key. He's the door. He's the air. He's the transcendent reality that overrides all the laws that bind us.
And that living paradox is our reality right now. We are still constrained. We live in this contingent world, but we are no longer enslaved by it. Our journey is about trusting the one who is truly, absolutely unbound. The one who, as the psalmist says, does whatever pleases him.
Which means the promise holds. The one from the liberator himself. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
And maybe we can leave you with one final thought to mull over. We've spent this whole time establishing that the transcendent God needs nothing. He exists in absolute aseity. And yet, this is the great mystery of the gospel. The Son of God willingly chose to stoop down and become a man who needed everything.
Food, sleep, air.
And he even submitted to the final jail of death and decay. So the question to ponder is this. What does Christ's own voluntary submission to the jail of necessity tell us about the nature of the freedom he offers? Especially when he said in John 10, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord."
He had the power to avoid the jail entirely.
He had all the power in the universe. What does it mean that the truly free one entered the prison willingly to set the captives free?
That is the ultimate question, something to think about as you navigate the constraints of your own world, remembering they are not the final word.